Dr. Greenspan, I want to start with you. You were the longest-serving chairman of the Federal Reserve in history, and during this period of time, you were perhaps the leading proponent of deregulation of our financial markets. Certainly, you were the most influential voice for deregulation. You have been a staunch advocate for letting markets regulate themselves. Let me give you a few of your past statements. In 1994, you testified at a congressional hearing on regulation of financial derivatives. You said there is nothing involved in federal regulation which makes it superior to market regulation. In 1997, you said there appears to be no need for government regulation of off-exchange derivative transactions. In 2002, when the collapse of Enron led to renewed congressional efforts to regulate derivatives, you wrote the Senate, "We do not believe a public policy case exists to justify this government intervention." And earlier this year, you wrote in the Financial Times, "Bank loan officers, in my experience, know far more about the risks and workings of their counterparties than do bank regulators." And my question for you is simple. Were you wrong? Be sure the mic is turned on.
Partially, but let's separate this problem into its component parts. I took a very strong position on the issue of derivatives and the efficacy of what they were doing for the economy as a whole, which in effect is essentially to transfer risk from those who have great difficulty in absorbing it to those who have the capital to absorb losses if and when they occur. These derivatives are working well. Let me put it to you very specifically.
So you don't think you were wrong in not wanting to regulate the derivatives?
Well, it depends which derivatives we're talking about.
Okay.
Credit default swaps, I think, have serious problems associated with them. But the bulk of derivatives, and indeed the only derivatives that existed when the major discussions started in 1999, were those of for interest rate risk and foreign exchange risk.
Let me interrupt you because we do have a limited amount of time, but you said in your statement that you delivered, the whole intellectual edifice of modern risk management collapsed. You also said those of us who have looked to the self-interest of lending institutions to protect shareholders' equity, myself especially, are in a state of shocked disbelief, end quote. Now that sounds to me like you're saying that those who trusted the market to regulate itself, yourself included, made a serious mistake.
Well, I think that's true of some products, but not all. I think that's the reason why it's important to distinguish the size of this problem and its nature. And what I wanted to point out was that the excluding credit default swaps, derivatives markets are working well.
Well, where do you think you made a mistake then?
I made a mistake in presuming that the self-interest of organizations, specifically banks and others, was such as that they were best capable of protecting their own shareholders and the equity in the firms. And it's been my experience, having worked both as a regulator for 18 years and similar quantities in the private sector, especially 10 years at a major international bank, that the loan officers of those institutions knew far more about the risks involved in the people to whom they lent money than I saw even our best regulators at the Fed capable of doing. So the problem here is something which looked to be a very solid edifice and indeed a critical pillar to market competition and free markets did break down, and I think that, as I said, shocked me. I still do not fully understand why it happened, and obviously to the extent that I figure out where it happened and why, I will change my views. I mean, if the facts change, I will change.
You had an ideology. You had a belief that that free, competitive, and this is your statement, I do have an ideology. My judgment is that free, competitive markets are by far the unrivaled way to organize economies. We've tried regulation, none meaningfully worked. That was your quote. You have the authority to prevent irresponsible lending practices that led to the subprime mortgage crisis. You were advised to do so by many others, and now our whole economy is paying its price. Do you feel that your ideology pushed you to make decisions that you wish you had not made?
Well, remember that what an ideology is a conceptual framework with the way people deal with reality. Everyone has one. You have to exist, you need an ideology. The question is whether it is accurate or not. And what I'm saying to you is, yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant or permanent it is, but I've been very distressed by that fact. But if I may I just finish an answer to the question previously?
You found a flaw in the reality.
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
In other words, you found that your view of the world, your ideology was not right. It was not working.
Precisely. No, that's precisely the reason I was shocked, because I had been going for 40 years or more with very considerable evidence that it was working exceptionally well.